Mr. Hollywood Built. We're gonna talk
Morning.
about bikini, bikini girls, bikini chicks, bikini females, bikini whatever the hell you want to call them. And I would like to get your thoughts about mastering physiological fitness to actually get to the point where you can start building bikini type physique. Because I believe there is a period of time where somebody has to go through a certain amount of, let's say, training or nutrition or maybe mindset for them to actually be prepared to embark on the journey to build that kind of physique. You know, like if somebody comes to me and says, like, I want to do powerlifting event or strongman or bodybuilding, I'm like, let's sit down and talk about that stuff first. And if they don't understand what it actually means, you're not gonna get there. You know, and with girls, is usually it took almost 2 years of actually training before I would consider that their body is ready to be morphed into more like bikini style shape, rather than just chasing let's lose body fat, because more often than not they don't have much body fat to begin with. They think they do, not realizing that it's not healthy to be as lean as they are already to begin with. So let me know your thoughts about, is there such thing as the perfect starting point where you would like everyone to be at before they start thinking about competing in bikini show, let's say? Is there a fitness level you would say would be good? Is there maybe some strength levels that would be good? Is there maybe knowledge that they possess in terms of understanding nutrition, understanding training, recovery, and those kind of things that you would like them to have, so the journey is smooth instead of having extremely stressful experience?
Um, I don't know if there's a perfect starting point. If there is, I've never had it. So I don't know what it would be. I have had perfect qualities of some of those aspects in people, but not all of the above. And I think all those examples you mentioned all are very relevant. Um, to me, the best starting point, if they're serious about bikini as a competition, like as a client competitor, trying to say be Miss Olympia, the biggest thing they could have is the proper genetics in terms of their morphological shape, because I can't change that within with a degree I can, right? Like muscle mass we can change, body composition we can change, adiposition we can reduce, etc. But the shape, the genetic waist hip ratio, all these things, a lot of that stuff is just what you got. The top Olympia competitors all have very good genetics, and that's why they're there. They all use the same drugs. Some of them use more than others, but they all use the same drugs, same training, same glute exercises, same. It's the genetics that is the differentiation between them. Um, so when it comes to that kind of stuff, the things that I can change, health parameters, cardiovascular health, muscle mass, strength, etc. All those things are obviously important. I would like a female to be knowledgeable on what actually it takes to be at the top level. I think where I'm from here, bikini was sort of this category that just allowed naturally thin women to walk out on stage in a bikini and do well. So when it sort of became a category here, there wasn't really any criteria except for, look like you go on the beach every day. And that was enough to win shows. And so that became the norm. So they didn't have to train hard. They didn't have to really do anything but just look the part. And they did. And so a lot of them seemingly did well in the beginning. The category has changed quite a bit. The amount of muscle mass these females carry now, the level of body fat they carry, it's not really achievable without a lot of dedication, a lot of time, a lot of commitment, and some drug use. So it's morphed a lot. So I think one of the more difficult qualities that a female could have, which would be ideal, is the mindset of understanding what's involved in getting towards the top of the category. It's not just you know, I'm thin and with, you know, breast implants and I have a bikini on, I could go stand on stage, because they could do okay at their local high school show. And a lot of them do. But when they start climbing the ladder of competitions and get to the tougher categories or tougher tiers, they get smoked, because the women there have spent some years training and developed some muscle, and it takes time. Even with drugs, it still takes time. So there needs to be a bunch of starting points, but there has to be an understanding that what it takes to get to the top is not an overnight process. It's going to require some commitment. You have to have a lot of things in play. You have to understand nutrition, the training, the lifestyle, the support that you're going to need around you, because it's going to occupy so much of your time. So the lot goes into it, really, when you're trying to, again, separate from like, I just want to look good in a bikini versus I want to be a competitor at the top level of bikini, of the bikini category.
Yeah, we've had I don't know, it's probably still a thing in UK where they have toned, trained bikini, physique bikini, and like kind of separates three classes of bikini as well.
Yeah.
I'm interested into like these perfect genetics because I find it fascinating that something people overlook massively. Like my bone structure, like my girth of bones is pretty big. So I will never look good being skinny. Like I will look ripped, but I will never look like a bodybuilder. I will look like just a plank with some muscles.
Right.
And I can stand next to somebody who's got really tiny bones and they weigh 10, 20 kilos lighter than me and they look twice as big as me. So I'm guessing that's what you're referring to. And is there like a specific ratio you might kind of consider like, hey, if your shoulder width is so big and your hips are not aware bigger and that like that, like, okay, understand you're gonna look great, but you're not gonna be very highly placed bikini athlete?
I don't know about an actual numerical ratio that would work, but I can tell you that the tinier the waist, the bigger everything around it looks. And I mean, when they look at that category, they're trying to create cartoon-ish figures of an hourglass. We can build glutes, we can build shoulders, we can only shrink the waist so much. So if you have, you know, a flared rib cage, or you have very dense bones or something like that, that literally is changing the circumference, or you've spent years training a different sport and you've now decided and you've built a lot of musculature around your midsection or your core, you're going to be thicker. Yeah, you're going to have a harder time. You see, there's been a couple IFBB pros that switched from figure down to bikini, and it took them years to shrink things to get to that category, and they did okay, but they'll never be top tier, because it's just the top tier people literally are genetically slightly different. Like in every other sport, you look at the top professional in any sport, they have a lot of genetics on their side that help them, that separates them from the rest. Everyone can train, everyone can take drugs, everyone can do all the things, but you can't change genetics. So it's a big deciding factor. Now, broad shoulders helps for sure. A blocky midsection does not. Some people have that. Usually longer torsos allow for a leaner looking, smaller waist than shorter ones. But it's really hard to say. And from a numerical point of view, I don't know, because I've never had the perfect starting point. There's always been things to improve on. But the people that have genetically smaller waists, they look the part a lot quicker, because we don't have to make the muscles around that as big to create that illusion. Bigger your waist, the bigger I have to make your shoulders and glutes. The bigger I have to make your shoulders and glutes, the more time it's going to take. So it really kind of depends on your starting point, what you're working with.
So when you start building your physique, what about like strategic training? What is there a common denominator where some body part might grow quicker than another, or do you not find anything like that? Is it more like specifically from person to person? So like some might grow this body part quicker than other, and so on and so forth. Or is it more down to, do they actually spend enough time to acknowledge how to get that muscle involved? Like for me, it took 15 years to learn how to understand to engage my lats when I do movements. So my arms are big because I always do all rowing movements with my arms. Like, I don't need to use straps when I do anything because I can handle 90 kilos in my palms any time of the day, you know. So, because I never train my back, I always train my grip and my biceps without knowing it. So,
Right, right.
is that element playing into roles that, hey, you're not building this body part as quick as that person because you just don't know how to actually train that body part? Or is there a genetic aspect in sense of these muscles always grow quicker than others?
Um, I believe there's a genetic component of that mind muscle connection. When you're just talking about like hypertrophy of a muscle, not necessarily its performance abilities, but its physical size, I believe there's a genetic component of that mind muscle connection. I don't have, I haven't noticed a trend in um, bikinis always have really been individual, but I do find that
Broke up a little
females,
bit. Sorry, what did you say? Bikinis always have what?
I've never noticed it where bikinis always have a mind muscle connection here and they don't here. It's been very individual, but on the whole, I typically find females have more strength in the lower body, and it comes naturally to them. Their upper body's always more work. That makes sense to me, just from a biological point of view, and just seeing their everyday life. They're always, you know, whatever they do, they move, and they have to move themselves with their lower body. So their lower body's always been getting some sort of stimulus throughout life. Their upper body, maybe not. Depends what they did for a living, depends what they did for hobbies, exercise, or whatever. So typically with bikini girls, getting them to put some size on their upper body takes more work, takes more focus, and they need to learn how to lift correctly, especially when we talk about say lats and shoulders. Oftentimes, you see, I actually literally just witnessed one yesterday morning, a lady doing a pull down, but she's pulling down so far that she's going like this and then this with the machine because she's just trying to pull it down like to her lat. Like
Mm.
it's like no one's instructed her like, what are you trying to target here? Like your lats, your shoulders, your core when you crunch the rest of it down. So she, you know, she just probably hasn't been shown, but so definitely with the upper body, the ability to target the muscle is important because everyone's going to have a waist and whatever thickness we've got. We can't really shrink it a whole lot. Once the body fat is where it needs to be, your waist is your waist. So it's important to put as much muscle on the surrounding areas that we're trying to target to create that illusion as much as we possibly can. So we want to be very, very specific with where we focus the stress. We want to focus it on the lats, on the lateral delt, or whatever. So the technique has to be strict, like very strict, because you're trying to put stimulus in a very, very targeted area. We don't want to have a lot of additional movements and momentum happening because it's going to take away from that ratio that we're trying to create, especially under the influence of drugs. Like if you're doing such a heavy movement that you're swaying, say I'm doing a lateral delt raise and I'm doing this at the same time, it doesn't seem like much, but every time I do a lateral flexion or a lateral bend, my obliques are working more than they otherwise would be. And over time, you start to change the circumferences here as well. Same with compound movements. The more, or not even just compound, just the more I have to put additional stress in my core to stabilize myself, the more stimulus that's getting. And under the influence of drugs, that becomes quite powerful. So I think the strength training in bikini athletes is wildly important and done quite poorly a lot of the times. Um, it just is that all the ones that are winning are all doing the same thing. So everyone thinks, well, that's working. But I guarantee you, we could do it better than what you see. There's no doubt about it because just understanding physiology and the stress response and specificity, we know we could do this better. But the fact that the top of the divisions are doing these things, everyone thinks, well, that's what you should do. Some of it, yes. Some of it, no.
So when you go from that, how do you distinguish what kind of nutrition they need to have to get the best results out of it? Because some Some might respond to high protein diets, some might respond to high fat, and a lot of times, specifically with girls, there are a lot of things that they perceive that are right, and you kind of have to have a good conversation about those kind of things. Is there a specific nutritional plan that you find that works the best when building these type of bodies, or is it from personal view more important than hey, this is overall things that everyone who's doing bikini shows does, let's follow this?
Um, what I think is the most important thing, aside from the obvious basics, like you know, choosing the proper foods in terms of quality. Aside from that, which we can talk about if you want, I think the biggest thing for females trying to create the physique is having enough calories in play. We need to have the energy coming in. Females are oftentimes trying to build muscle and eat very little at the same time because they're afraid to, I'm assuming, put on body fat. And around here, still, despite how many years it's been, it still seems like lower carb training is what people do, females are doing. And I think it's because when they introduce carbs, their body weight goes up, and that, for whatever reason, is a fear for them because they think it's like fat, and it's not. So the biggest detriment I'm seeing is they're just trying to grow, assuming their drugs are not in play, they're trying to grow with inadequate food, and you'll just spin your wheels. In fact, you'll probably regress because you'll put on a little bit of muscle, sure. You won't be able to continue to put on muscle. It'll plateau for sure, but you will put so much wear and tear on your system from having inadequate calories, especially your joints and stuff like that, that over time, by the time you're starting to see what you're trying to see, you're probably dug yourself such a hole that you won't be able to climb out of it within, it'll take years, and then you've missed the window of opportunity. So the biggest thing to me is adequate calories, assuming again the food quality is in place. We've talked about that before. I wrote a book on that stuff, but you need protein, obviously. You need some fats, but really, to me, the bulk of the carb or the calories should be in the form of carbs, within reason. And then from there, it's individual. Some females literally do not tolerate higher amounts of carbs. Ethnicity comes into play here as well, but that's individual. At the end of the day, humans respond to foods. We know how they respond to foods. And if there's an individual that has a certain, niche scenario, then we just adjust accordingly. But all of us need adequate food first. And if that's not even in play, it's almost like you're starting 10 feet behind the starting line.
Is there for you a specific kind of number you're trying to shoot for based on like metabolic rate and whatnot? So let's say, from what I hear, is the main focus should always be building muscle, and you are more likely to build muscle if you are at least in calorie maintenance kind of zone, ideally a little bit above, so there is actually energy to build the tissue. Is there a specific numbers that you would shoot, let's say 200 calories above maintenance or whatever, or is that not as important?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I do. I use a percentage of. So I use people's lean body composition as my determining factor of how to determine the caloric needs. So we measure how much lean muscle mass is on their body, and I use that. I use there's tons of equations you can use. I like Catch McCardle. I use that one. I've been using that one for almost 20 years. So I'm just familiar with it. There's other ones. It doesn't really matter as long as you're making real world adjustments based on what you're seeing. But to start off, I use that. I determine their lean body mass, determine their caloric needs. I take a look at their lifestyle so I can adjust for their physical activity. I then also calculate how many calories I think they're going to burn for the training that I'm designing for them to do, because I can calculate these things. And then I have all that, and I determine maintenance, which I don't love the term, but because it's a moving target all day long. But we have to have a starting point. So I calculate maintenance, and then from there, if I want to be in a surplus, I usually bump them up a percentage, usually like a certain percentage, usually 2 to 5%, something like that. But I base that on how lean they are. The leaner they are, the bigger the percentage increase I put. The more body fat they have, usually on the lower side. And then all I do is put it in play. It's just math, it's just theory. And then I put it in play, and then I measure real world results. But I also make sure that we wait between two similar phases of their menstrual cycle, if they have one. If they don't, I give the same amount of time as if they did. Because even with females that aren't regularly menstruating, or even in menopausal women, they may not menstruate, but we still get very similar psychological and physiological symptoms that repeat. So I want to make sure I've allowed enough time to measure similar phases. I want follicular versus follicular, or luteal versus luteal. We've talked about this before. That's the only way I feel confident that the calories I've given, assuming they've been followed, are yielding the results that were measured. And then from there, I adjust based on what happened. If we gained a little bit of fat, which almost never, ever happens, then I adjust down. If we didn't, depends on what we're trying to do. I might bump it up. I might leave it the same. I think too many people get caught up in this tracking. Like I track a lot of stuff, but I don't make a lot of adjustments quickly. I think too many people are making adjustments on the fly all the time. Oh, body weight went up, cut calories. Or your coach says, send me a picture of you on Friday. You do, and oh, cut calories or add cardio on Saturday. Like they're doing things way too fast. The body is averages over time. We can't make these drastic decisions so quickly. The body doesn't know Sunday to Monday or Sunday to Saturday. It's averages over time. And you could be just constantly changing things before you've actually even gotten an understanding of what that new homeostatic point looks like. And then you're forever chasing your tail, and it becomes very difficult. So I'm a lot more patient with letting my clients do this stuff. And if they don't like it, I just try to coax them along and explain why we're waiting, because some of them don't like to wait. But it's part of the game. You have to. If you come to me eating 1,400 calories and want to start prep, we've got nowhere to go. Like I shouldn't have to get your calories much below that at the final stages. I mean, there's times where that happens. Usually it's body weight dependent. Like very, very small girls are going to go, 1,000 or less possibly. But on average, that's already low. If you started there, we've got nowhere to go. So we need to spend some time making sure your body's getting all the food it can without gaining any unnecessary adipose tissue. And that could take a few months, but it's well worth the wait. Because if I'm giving you $2,000 a day to spend, and we've only been spending 1,400, and now you've got an extra 600. Like, what do you do with all this extra money? Like, you've got all these new options, and if none of that caused fat gain, what would you rather have? 1,400 calories or 2,000? Like, it's a no-brainer. So if you can reassure them, and I do that, that hey, 2,000 or 2,200 is not going to cause fat gain, they can then become comfortable with eating a little bit more of a variety, enjoying a little bit more things in life with moderation, and still make progress. I don't have a single female on my roster right now that's eating under 1,500 calories, anywhere near that. And all the girls and the bikini competitors that are in off season that are quite small, like 125-pound girls, they're all eating 2,200 calories as maintenance with relatively sedentary jobs. Like they're not like fitness trainers for life. They work at a desk. So they can eat 2,000, 2,200 calories and not gain fat. That's very, very nice and comforting to know, when some of them that I'm working with now used to be eating, 1,400 to do the same thing, thinking that anything more would cause fat gain. And it won't, almost certainly won't. So I think it's really important that you establish an accurate minimum, and the minimum should be a lot higher than you probably are currently doing.
Do you have any seasonal changes as well? Let's say summer, winter, and so forth.
Food wise, it kind of depends on the lifestyle, where they live, the climate they're in. because of how I coach, I have a lot of international clients. So some people live like in, you know, Florida and California, like the West Coast in the sun all year round. It's not as relevant. People here where I live, sometimes a little different. It kind of depends. There's some relative reasons for some changes, but it depends on the person and where they are with what we're doing. Sometimes when you're down in like, you know, 1,800, 2,000 calories, the change that you might want to do, it's going to be a little bit of a shift from carbs to fats and back and forth. Um, it's relevant, but I usually, unless there's an issue, I usually let compliance dictate that. Unless there's something that they're talking about or blood work is showing that we need to address, usually compliance takes care of that for me relatively well. And then from there, we just kind of gauge what's going on. If there's not enough calories, like if we're in a very, very energy deficit for a reason, and the calories are very sparing, we have to use them sparingly, then I'm a little bit more specific. But if there's enough to go around, I usually let compliance dictate what we do, you know, aside from like health marker parameters or issues like that.
How about long-term planning? Because I like to know where who's gonna be when. You know, like, hey, I'm gonna go 2 weeks there and then 6 weeks there and whatever. And then I like to install different training plans, different training phases, and sometimes even nutrition. So how important is that for structuring somebody for looking great? And how much time do you usually need to spend to explain people that getting in shape and staying in shape might not be same exact strategy?
I find I'm explaining that daily to people, sometimes to the same person. Um, the hard work is getting to the goal. Like that's where all the work is. Like if I want to put on, you know, 5 pounds of muscle, the work is putting on the 5 pounds of muscle. Once I have the 5 pounds of muscle, keeping it is not that hard. It really isn't. So I explain it to people all the time. And to answer the first question, ideally, I have a client that's in it for the long run. If someone says to me, like I have a couple world class combat athletes, one just actually won the world championship again, so he's the two-time gold medalist now, and it's only happened twice, so he's the GOAT and in the Hall of Fame now. And he hires me for the year, and he's hired me again for the next year. So I have the whole year, and I literally have one of the sheets that we've tracked is the periodized plan over the year of the tentative blocks of what I'm expecting to be doing. Obviously, they change when we get closer, but at least we have an idea of what it's going to look like. And we have an idea of when is there a fight or when is there a competition or whatever. Same thing goes. Imagine if you're trained Mr. or Miss Olympia, you know when the Olympia is, you've got all year to plan for it. Like that's such a sweet spot to have. You can plan everything around that, and that's the ideal situation. When you're getting towards that, you have to be a little bit more, you know, flexible to be able to adjust for things, but it's still better to know big picture, especially if I have females that, and it's very popular, that want to be using PEDs. I don't want to start a course today, run it for whatever, 4, 6 weeks, and then stop and then reassess and then do it again and on, do it again. Like I'm moving forward with drug use. I'd rather know, hey, I need to be here at this state. I'm here right now. What's the timeline in between? And then I can plan things accordingly. It's going to be a lot better for longevity, sustainability, and overall outcome. So I would much rather plan for the big picture, and then we can do things like you're going on holidays, no problem. We can adjust for this. We can adjust for that. I mean, I've had people go on holidays 4 weeks out of a competition and win the overall because it doesn't matter. We can adjust. It doesn't matter where you go. You can go on the other side of the world. I don't care. Food is food is food is food. There's certain things that have to stay consistent, but not everything. As long as we understand what has to change or what will change, we can adjust accordingly, and it's no problem. If we have to do it on the fly, it becomes a lot more difficult and a lot more volatile.
So it almost sounds like it's not as important as what you're going to do for next 6 weeks, but being more understanding that, hey, if you really want to get this nailed down, you need to envision yourself for next 5, 10, 15 years, or maybe lifetime, that these things have to be mindfully assessed way ahead of the time and then plan accordingly so you actually can have enjoyment and all those kind of things that people so throw out like, hey, mindful eating and this and that. And usually those people who use mindful eating are the ones who have been obsessed with eating really, really
Yeah,
long time. And now they can do that because they look at food differently than someone who doesn't understand that piece of lettuce is useless. There's nothing.
100%.
So
Yeah, 100%.
would
And I totally agree. And if it's just a one-off, if somebody just says, "Hey, I just want to do a one-off show," that's a one-off show. I understand that. But if you're taking this serious, you should be thinking years down the road. Like, I mean, I don't have competition goals. I'm too old for that now. Like, I was preparing for the worlds for jujitsu, but my knee got destroyed, and so I'm out of that now. But my goal is my target is for 55. So I have 9 years to reach my goal. So I have a 9-year plan. So that's no big deal. And it's nothing difficult. I could literally probably worry about my 55-year goal when I'm 54, but I'll just kind of work towards it over the next 9. I think it's a lot better, a lot easier to just make adjustments, lifestyle changes, create habits that send you or project you towards the goal and just kind of go with it. It's going to be much more sustainable and a lot more easily attained.
what would you say to people that hear this message all over the social media that being in competitive stages is not good, is not healthy, and so on and so forth? Because let's be honest, at high level, it isn't, but nothing at high level is. But is there a health aspect that's actually beneficial for people? Because sometimes I feel that message getting completely screwed up and put out almost as, hey, if you're in great shape, you're unhealthy.
Yeah. It's contextual to the person for sure. I mean, just because someone has visible abs doesn't mean their fucking lipid panel's not a disaster and they're on the fringe of a cardiac arrest or anything like that. So I wouldn't judge a book by its cover in terms of how they look in terms of health. But I would say that if someone's practicing majority of their eating habits to being, 80% of that nutrient dense, calorically poor foods, produce and butcher oil, those kinds of habits, if they're regularly exercising, if they're mindful of what they do overall from a longevity point of view, that's good stuff. But there's no way to know unless you're actually measuring. And I think it's important that people do some measuring. Some blood work periodically is a very good idea to just see where you're at. When it comes to like the aesthetics, there's a level of leanness that is achievable and sustainable. There's also a level of leanness that's achievable and not sustainable and very, very unhealthy. The social media people, the influencers, they attain this level of leanness that is extreme, and they maintain it with drug use and probably terrible, terrible other habits that are not healthy, but you're not seeing them. And then you think that they can maintain this forever, and they can't, and they won't, and you'll see that none of them ever did. But a female can absolutely look good all year round and not be in a detrimental place. But what I do with my female clients, I had one that just won the overall in what month is this? November, in October. And so what we did is we immediately, I'm not a reverse dieting guy. I think that's a crock of shit. I think that's the biggest scam going. But immediately after the show was done, her calories went up to maintenance immediately. Well, that day they were surplus because she celebrated. The following day, Sunday, maintenance calories. And then for the first week, I left them there and then I increased them. And what we did from that point on is I look for some body fat to come back. I use the caliper to determine it. She checks in with me every week. So every week I caliper her. And we were gaining body fat at the rate of 1 to 2 millimeters every 3 to 4 weeks. So too slow, in my opinion. But she's hesitant, and I understand that. I play along, but as long as we're going in the right direction, I don't mind. From there, now that we're at a body fat percentage that's relatively healthy, she is very lean. And now I'm like, okay, how do you feel? She says she feels amazing. I know she's lying to me, but I just play with that. because she feels good and I want her to feel good, but I know she doesn't feel amazing, but she likes how she looks. And that's wildly influential on females. So I play along with that as well. And then we make the deal, okay, we're going to check bloods. And then from here, the juggle is, how do you look? How do you feel? What do your bloods say? The bloods trump what she feels, and we have an agreement. So when she brings me the bloods, which is coming in a few weeks, that will be the deciding factor of, do we need to put on any more body fat? And if so, how much? It won't be much. She will probably hover around 16%, 17%.
Which is for women.
It's very lean for a female, but it's not lean enough for a stage. And that's fine. She can't stay stage lean unless she wants to stay on drugs. She doesn't. So it's still very, very lean. Everyone around her will think she looks amazing. She'll have to adjust her mindset on how she looks, but with the encouragement of people around her that matter, she'll be fine and she will be healthy. And we will verify that with blood work, and I'll make sure she feels good. And if there is the debate of health markers say one thing, but I feel something else, well, this is when, what do? I can't force anyone to do anything. I make them aware. I explain what I feel the risks are and what they aren't, and then they kind of decide. I haven't had it where it's been a major disagreement. I've had it where we've compromised a little bit, but typically females are doing fine, and there's no rebounds like everyone talks about that you have to reverse diet. Reverse diet is such a bullshit claim. She did not rebound at all. None of my clients rebound. All that it is just an adjustment to what she needs now. She's making that. She's menstruating regularly. Everything is normal. And I believe she feels good. I don't think she feels amazing. I think she's just very happy with how she looks. But that's sort of the juggle at the end, is you got to make sure certain health markers are where they need to be. And then the individual matters too, especially if fertility is still a concern. Some people it is, some people it isn't, because that's really one of the bigger risks. Staying super lean as a female is just the risk of amenorrhea and disrupting the menstrual cycle, which is possible fertility issues down the road. But that's an individual thing that we have those conversations with the person, depending.
And it's not just that, it's like bone density and many other things, right? It's like
absolutely,
hair health and many things that people don't consider. They look on their abs and they're like, oh, where did my hair fall out?
That's right. Yeah.
And
yep,
I'm very aware that we don't have much time and I need to let you off, but I just want to get out of you. Do you think that leanness becomes healthier the longer they get back into that lean stage? Just yes or no, do you observe that? And I'll let you off.
Do I think leanness?
So if a person gets lean and then after a while they get lean again and again and again, so next time those blood lipids and everything is not as damaging and as crazy as they were if they went there first time.
Yeah, I find the longer that they can stay at a new homeostatic point, the less burden it is on the body to re-achieve a level of leanness they needed before. Yeah, I find that every time.
Awesome, Scott. Appreciate your time as usual, and I'll pick up on your brain on the next video.
That sounds good. Thanks.